Gordy. Welcome to another virtual convention. Once again, we'll get the ball rolling from down here in Australia. I'm Brad, for anyone that doesn't know, and I'm joined here with none other than our own soldering guru, Martin It's Hot Jenkins. And yeah, how are you going up there today, Martin? Perfect. Well, we'll get this ball rolling. And first up, we've got John from New South Wales. And like Gordy said, John's got automated semaphore signals on his layout, and he's going to show us how he uses those and controls those on his layout. So take it away, John.
Thanks, Brad and Martin and Geordie. Just want to first of all say thank you for you guys for setting this up. I think it's a great idea. And it's really good that we're able to access people from all around the world, especially when we can't travel anyway. But even if we could, we probably wouldn't get to a lot of these places. So, yeah, when I was a boy, I used to go riding on steam trains. I mean, my first layout I had, I saw a picture of one. I didn't put it up today, but I had an O-gauge Hornby train running around my backyard with handbelt track when I was about 15, I think. It was pretty rugged compared to the stuff you guys come up with. But anyway, I used to go riding on steam trains and photographing them. In the end, I travelled all around the world. But in New South Wales, around here, it was up until about 1973 when steam finished in this part of the world. So I was lucky enough to see the last 10 years of steam trains here. I know you guys in the States, it vanished a long time ago, but it all happened pretty quickly. Everything disappeared within about 4 or 5 years, I suppose. And in the later areas, there was an area called Fassifern, which is between where I live now, Gosford and Newcastle, about 80 miles from Sydney, 90 miles from Sydney, where there was a lot of steam action in that 1960, 1970 period. And we also used to go up there and stand on the hill, get drenched with rain sometimes, and photograph these trains. So I'll just, this is what we used to see up there, these double Garretts. These were the 60 class Garretts. Some of you might have seen them on some of the other presentations from last time. But it was one of the most spectacular things you could ever see. 2 of these giant steam engines hauling fully loaded coal train. Usually they were loaded so high that they were over the maximum load. On a 1 in 40 grade, it's a 2.5% grade. So I had such good memories of that. I thought that's what I've got to model. And I had 3 goes at it. The current layout I started about 3 years ago. So I've done it all in about 3 years. But anyway, my model is Fassifern. And one of the reasons for that is because of what it's got. And you have a look here. It's got everything you want, you know, in a modeler. It's got a branch line, which is this one down here, which heads out to a place called Toronto, which is on a lake by the water. It's about 6. Yep. Oh, shit. Sorry. Let's fix that. Sorry, guys. I should have done that. Yeah, let's get back again. There's nothing much to screen to share. There we go. Okay, so there's the photo of the two Garretts climbing up the bank out of Fassifern. This particular occasion, for those who are interested, was the very last time it ever happened. We were just really lucky that it came up there right on sunset. So that photo's been shared in a couple of books around the place over the years. I was just very lucky to be there at exactly the right time for that one. But I'm sorry I didn't share it earlier, but we'll get there. This is the signal diagram of Fassifern, the station area, and you'll see there's a branch line where I'm pointing. It goes out towards Toronto to the lake. It's about, I think it's about 6 or 8 kilometres. It's only a short branch, but that branch had these 30 class tank engines, which used to haul the suburban trains in Sydney before electrification. Then there's a colliery branch, Newstown Colliery, and that's where the double Garretts used to start from. They used to back from the branch back out past the station to get a run at the hill, because the just from the station heading north, it went straight under a 1 in 40 grade. So they had to back out, get a bit of momentum to hit that hill as hard as they could. And the whole ground used to shake when they'd take up. They could also have coal trains heading the other direction from Newcastle down south through Fassifern to the next area to a power station down the road. So you could actually get these double-headed trains in both directions, which is really good for modelling. And then there's a double main line going through as well. And as I said, that line was probably one of the most heavy trafficked areas in Australia outside of a capital city. So it was just excellent. And there was a lot of steam movements there. So hence my layout is all steam. There were some diesels, but I just ignored them. Let's move on. So these are a couple of some of the trains that, these are my photos. And the first one is one of these Garretts coming down the hill at the top of the grade. This one's actually not at Fassifern, it's a bit earlier on, but that's a 35 class and a 59. Now 35s went out of service in 1968, but that's two double little engines. We call them smalls. The Garretts we call big engines in Australia. 38 class express passenger loco and a four-wheel truck goods train. That 3801, which is the Streamline 38, that's the iconic engine in Australia. It's a little bit like the New York Central Hudsons, and that had something to do with the design of it. And on that particular occasion, this is at Fassifern Station. He was stopped there. I was actually firing it that day. I was shoveling the coal, and I hopped off and got a picture, which I was really happy about later, because when I was modelling the detail of the station, this photo has given me a lot of information on that detail. This is just another double header with the standard goods and a Garrett, and then the 36 class. It's one of the other passenger engines. So you can see there's quite a lot of different types of locomotive, not just one, whereas a lot of places, like in China, you get one locomotive, QJ, and you get QJ, and you get QJ. Here's a picture. I've got a couple of pictures here. On the right is my layout with a 30 class coming in with a passenger from Toronto. On the left is an actual picture of a 30 class on a local from Toronto coming into Fassifern Station. So that's my model, and that's the actual one. This is at Toronto Station at the end of the branch, taking water. So that's the real one, and that's the model. So to give you an idea, I've done the overbridge and everything. I've got a few stations. I tried to get them as detailed as possible, but that never ends. You just keep putting more and more detail on to make them look a little bit more like the real thing. This is Fassifern Station. That's a double Garrett coming through on a freight, and then this is my version of Fassifern Station with the branch line heading around the corner there, and then the double track main line, and there's some sidings around the back as well. And this is heading up the hill out of Fassifern. Now, that signal is one I hand-built. That one here, I hand-built that to match this one on the real thing. And when you see the video at the end of this, you'll see a lot of these sections of the layout, so you'll get an idea of how the layout looks compared to the real thing. It's not perfect, of course, but it's designed to follow things. All right, let's just keep going. Okay, so I've drawn some rough track plans. Sorry about the lack of expertise on drawing, but I thought I'd better give you an idea of how my actual layout works. So this is the Fassifern area here on the bottom left. You can all see that, can you, with the pointer? And the trains run from Fassifern. The branch line goes around here to Toronto, and then there's a run around loops, so the train can go down, the engine can run around and then take it back again. And then from Fassifern, it heads up the 1 in 40. Well, I've got a 1 in 50 on mine, 2% grade. Goes up the hill, and then it goes around a return loop and back down the hill, or it branches off and goes right around the back of the layout on an incline all the way around to the upper level. So I haven't got a helix. I've got a big, long, sweeping 1 in 50 grade, takes it up to the top level. And the top level comes around to what I call Newcastle, which is not complete yet. Newcastle being a terminal station. Then you can also, from the bottom layout, it's double track going up the hill as well. They only did that in January, February. I decided to duplicate it to give it more operations. Then you've got a return loop there, so you can actually go up the hill around the return loop and back down again, or you can go around the return loop and then head on up the northern line and go through what I call Branxton and Singleton. Now, they're actually stations. The Branxton station is pretty close to the real thing. The Singleton one's still a work in progress. It's not finished yet. So, and I've also got a colliery along the way there as well. That one there, that's colliery actually existed at the back of Branxton. I've got photos of all these areas in Steam Days, so I was lucky I had a lot of photos I could use for background. On the upper level, you can go up to Newcastle, terminate there, come back down to Fassifern, or you can go from Newcastle around the loop to Singleton and back, point to point, or you can go from Sydney up around the loop and either through to Singleton or back down to Sydney. So it gives me a lot of variety of operations in that regard. On the lowest level, as I said, the return route goes back around. I've got my newsstand colliery ended up being, it's got more sidings than that. It ended up being a staging area and shunting area. So that's sort of growing out of all proportion, and most of my spare wagons are stored in there and trains. And then I've got a road that runs around the back of the main platform, which is kind of like a departure road. And then there's a crossover after that. So I can go out of there, and on the Australia, right, we run on the left-hand side, not the right-hand side. So when it comes out, it goes over a crossover onto the, in that case, the up main. And then I've got two storage sidings on this side and one on the other. And they're actually behind a, what do you call it? A scenery board, a backdrop. They're behind a backdrop. So sometimes I have to pull the backdrop off if I've got an operating session, because otherwise people stall trains in the back and things happen. So that's basically the layout. Now that one from those loops, that also has another return loop, so it comes back around. Okay, so you can have continuous running on the bottom layout, or you can have continuous running up to the top and back down to the bottom. So it's got quite a bit of variety in terms of operations. Now, those little things that say LQ, they're lower quadrant signals. So I've got a home signal coming into Fassifern, lower quadrant. I've got a lower quadrant starter signal at the end of the station, which is just past that overbridge that you probably, if you remember it, with the real thing. Then I've got another lower quadrant up the hill. There's a road bridge there. You'll see all these when you see it in operation. Then around the corner, I've got an upper quadrant. Now, I probably should really have a dual lower quadrant signal there, but anyway, I put an upper quadrant in, and that signal is connected through the point operation. All my point motors have got live frogs on them, which means we switch polarity on the frogs when the point switches. They're all operated from the controller, from my NC controller. Everything's got a DCC accessory connection to it. So everything can be completely operated from the one handset. So the upper quadrant if you have the points set to go up the hill, the turnout set to go up the hill, it will operate according to what's occupying the track going up the hill. If it's set for the return loop, it'll operate according to what's going on the return loop. So the signals will actually sync with the direction the trains are set to go. So you've got that upper quadrant there. Then you've got that big signal halfway down the hill, which is your home signal, and a starter signal from Fassifern. And then there's another lower quadrant at Toronto. So they're all the signals, and there's a few others on the upper section as well, but pretty well all these bottom ones I've got running automated. So that's what I'm going to tell you a bit about now. So this is one of my control panels. Each station area has a control panel. This is Fassifern Station. The numbers of the points are all DCC accessory numbers. So you can dial up the accessory number and switch the points. And the little lights on there, the green indicates the road is set for the train. Those LEDs are driven by the actual power on the frogs. I don't know how many of you know the technical side of point frogs, but if you have a live point frog, you have to have the right polarity on the frog, or you get shorts and you get train stalling and all sorts of troubles. So by connecting the outputs of the frogs and driving an LED with them, I know that the road is set properly and that the polarity of the points is right. And that's just my little idea, and I've got some circuitry to do that. So that shows on the down, I've got clear run up the hill there, and I can run a train through. So if I change a point, those two lights will change over. And basically, this is the Fassifern section. So in a way, it can be used as a block section. I know we're talking railroading here, but it can be used as a manual operation. So you can operate the signals, that 136 there, that's actually a signal number. So you can use accessory 136 and you can set that signal to red or green or whatever you want to do. So it can all be done manually as well as the automation. So it's kind of, you can have a signalman that can operate the Fassifern signal section. And with railways, you have block sections which are controlled by a local controller in the old days anyway, maybe not now. And then in between on the road is usually often automated. Okay, so the three types of signaling I've got on my layout, I've got some lower quadrant signals. That one's the Toronto starter signal. This is an actual one. Upper quadrant signals, which are three position. Three position gives you some challenges because you can't just have it occupying a section. You've got to be looking a section ahead, see what's going on. And colour light signals. This colour light signal's at Branxton, and I have a colour light signal installed at Branxton. And if you see this one over here, that's actually what they call a searchlight signal, which is a single light that changes colour. I haven't actually got any of those installed yet, but they're used as some of the automated signalings in that section. So just a bit of technical stuff. The lower quadrant semaphores are controlled by a Tam Valley octopus or singlets. Tam Valley's a company in the US that manufactures all this stuff. And it's got an octo decoder connected to it, which gives it DCC commands. So you need the octo decoder connected to the octopus to be able to operate from the DCC bus. The upper quadrants are controlled by Tam Valley three-way decoders. It's a three-way survey decoder you can get from Tam Valley that controls two upper quadrant signals. And the colour lights, I'm just using Arduino relays because the colour lights I've got, you just supply voltage onto them and the lights turn on. Okay, the signal detection, I use these. Now, I just have to say there's a lot of different ways you can detect, track, and you can operate signals. There's quite a few different systems. So I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. It's just the way I do it. But the NCE BD20 works quite well. It's got you put through, I recommend at least three runs through the transducer, I think it's called, so that it will detect the current coming through. So the power comes from the track through this around 3 times and then onto the DCC bus. And that way it detects when there's current being drawn. It's got 4 terminals. One's a ground, one's a signal, and the other one's a plus. And I run it with plus 12 volt DC. I've got a plus 12 volt DC bus on the layout. I find it works better with the relays with 12 volts and gives you a really good signal. I've got Arduino mini relays. So I'm going to show you all this stuff in a minute. I've got an NCE mini panel, which does all the instructions. So it will send a sequence out. So when a detector goes, it fires the relay, and the relay sends a signal to the mini panel, and then the mini panel carries out some sort of DCC sequence, and that operates signals or whatever you need to do on the light. It can do anything. You can do all sorts of stuff with that. The individual blocks are controlled by occupancy. So what I've got it set up so that it'll detect when a train enters the block section, turn the signal red with a lower quadrant. When the last car leaves the section, it'll go green again. It'll go clear. And I've got resistors fitted to my brake vans. So on the wheels of the brake vans, I've got a resistor across them, which means it's drawing a bit of current when it's passing through. Now, some people will paint all the wheels of all their wagons with a conductive paint to get that. Some people will put resistors on every single wheel. That's up to you. The only limitation with it is it depends on how long your sections are. Because if I run one of my really large trains, the brake van will be in one section and the locos will be in another section ahead. So there'll be a whole section in the middle which doesn't have a brake van or a train on it. So that can make the signals give false readings. All right, so the upper quadrant signal, it goes red when the train goes into the section, it goes amber when it leaves that section, and green when the train goes past the next section. So you can't just do a straight stop-go thing with an amber, with an upper quadrant if you want to make its signal work properly. And that became a challenge for me. That was one of the big things I had to overcome. But you can, with the controller, do a delay. So you can make it go amber and then make it wait 15 seconds or something and then go green. So you can get around it. You don't have to have the proper sectioning controlling it. And as I said, the signals are controlled by an accessory command. They have an accessory address. And for upper quadrant signals, you need 2 accessory addresses. So it's a little bit more complicated. I think I went the wrong way. Okay, so here's the electrical setup. So this is the track. From the track, you go through the transducer to the DCC bus. I've got 1,000 microfarad capacitor connected between the output and ground. Reason for that is because that stops bounce. So if the contacts are, if the wheels are a bit dirty, whatever, it'll give you a much better transition. So you don't have the signal going up and down and rattling around, which will happen, believe me, if you've got any dirt. And then there's the 12-volt supply. The output goes to the coil of Arduino relay, which is grounded on the other side. And then that's a single pole double throw relay. And depending upon which way the relay is thrown, whether it's on or off, it fires into 2 inputs into the mini panel. One of the things I discovered when I started doing this was that with the mini panel, it detects a transition from 1 to 0. So it detects when it goes grounded, when the input's grounded, but it doesn't do anything when it goes ungrounded. So that way I had to use 2, so I could have 1 when it went ground and 1 when it went open again. So 1 for entering the section, 1 for leaving the section. So there's 2 inputs. Each one of those inputs then fires the sequence to set the signals. This is a block of the Arduino, the mini Arduino relays. They're only small things, but they work really well. I got 2 banks of those. Okay, this is a diagram of how I set up my two sections. So that's one track going off there. It's the one going around the loop, and this one's heading down the main line. So I've got a track detector on this line, a track detector on that line. They feed into a double pole, double throw relay, which is controlled by the signal controller. So my point controller, sorry. So my turnout controllers actually have a relay contact in them. And what I'm doing is the relay contact from the turnout controller is operating a relay that's got double contacts on it, so it can control the DCC bus and which track detector is operating the signal. I hope that's not too complicated, but that's more or less how we do it. Now, there's some pictures of my electrical wiring. So the first one has, that's got a relay in there. That's where I've got my bit of a rat's nest there connecting that point frog and the detectors that goes through a bit of wiring there. This here, these are the controllers, the detectors. That's one of the detectors there. There's about 3 detectors in that diagram. There's another one there, another one up there. And this is the setup. That's the mini panel. And these are the 2 banks. I've got 16 Arduino relays running. And the mini panel will handle, I think, 30 inputs. So it will do quite a bit. Okay, so that's pretty well it. If you've got questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I think what I want to do now is just put a video which will show the trains running on the layout, and also will give you a demonstration of the signalling in action. So there's Martin there. I could stop that, right? There you go. Yep. So this is double Garrett's with a coal train starting out the back of Fassifern. So it got sound on it? Yeah, good. And it's coming around through the station, under the overbridge, past that first starter signal. Yeah, it's a bit stilted, unfortunately. And then it heads up the hill, and there's that other signal just before the overbridge. And this is a recreation of the actual trains that ran. This is the same number of wagons, 2 Garretts. My track work could probably be a bit better, but anyway, it works. It's really good when you get momentum and stuff right on your trains. They actually slow down when they go on the hills and that, and like the real thing, and labour up the hills, and then when they get over the top, they go faster again. It's really good. So the next thing's the Newcastle Express. Now, the Newcastle Express is one of Australia's most famous trains. Used to run from Sydney to Newcastle. They've got rid of Newcastle Station now, unfortunately. It's run by a 38 class, and it's going to come down the hill at full speed, about 70 miles an hour, scale speed. Here it comes. And this is just a little demonstration of changing points. It's probably hard to see, but that lower semaphore there, you'll see when I change the point, the 2 signals change. So the main line goes to red and the branch goes to green, and then back and forth. Anyway, it's probably not that easy to see. Now we'll get the flyer going up the hill. So that's heading around the return loop. And then I think that's heading up the hill towards Newcastle, that one. Used to ride on that train many times. This is the branch line. So it's a 30 class. I just thought I'd do a bit of a sequence where it runs around the train, the Fassifern station. I've got lights on the stations as well. It looks quite good with the lighting, actually. It does lift it a bit. So it's a bit slow. I had to set the points before I could bring it back. For the technical people, that one and the 38 are both fitted with lock sound DCC chips. Just a little bit jerky, isn't it, unfortunately, the video? Here she goes. I basically put this in just so you can see how you can do, operating, sort of like real train operations. On the layout. Those cars, Americans would probably recognise that sort of carriage. They were wooden cars. They won't run anymore because they only have steel cars on the rails now. We used to call them cowboy cars back in the day. So she heads off around the corner, and I've done a bit of backdrops and scenery and stuff, and some trees, gum trees I've made up. And that's going around the branch to Toronto. All my layout is in a single garage, a 6 by 3 metre, which is 20 by about 10 foot. So there's not a lot of room there. The next section I've got is the top section of the layout, and I've got the single-in passenger, which is this train, which was exactly like that one you see there leaving. That was the last steam haul passenger train, certainly in New South Wales and possibly Australia. And it was an engine which was, it was built in 1890, those engines. So they were quite old, they're 80 odd years old. And this model I've got was actually the engine that hauled that passenger train. And it's passing the colliery, a coal train on the colliery siding. The backdrops, incidentally, are photos I took on that section of line. So I went up to the area and took photos of the countryside behind the railway line. This is coming into Branxton. And that's a station which I've put a lot of detail into, and it's pretty close to the real thing. If you went to Branxton, you'd probably recognise it. So the train always stopped there, and then from there it goes around to Newcastle. So I'll just show you how it goes around the rest of the layout. Haven't got much scenery around that section of the layout yet. After this one, the last section of the video is actually the signalling system in operation. So you want to hang around just a minute and you get to see that. So this is where it meets up with the main line coming up from Fassifern. It's got a crossover on it, a double track. I've set my locos up for the technical people again. They've all got momentum on them, so there's 3 or 4 different decoders in the different locos. That one's got a tsunami in it, and they're set up in momentum so you can double head any 2 locos on the layout, and they'll more or less accelerate at the same speed. The goods engines are set to about 30 mile an hour maximum speed. The passenger engines somewhere between 60 and 70 mile an hour, because that was about as fast as they ever went in New South Wales. And she's just coming into Newcastle station. I'm working on a backdrop for the station. I've got some pictures of the buildings behind it and that, but it's quite a complicated station, Newcastle. And now they've closed it and shortened the line, so nobody will ever go by train there again. So okay, so this is the signalling, different type of engine. There's the signal changing there. So I've got the sequence here. With the signalling, I've still got to make a few adjustments to the sections because they don't all move exactly at the right spot. Heads up the hill. So that one goes to red, and then the other one goes to amber when it leaves the section. And then this one, you'll see it goes to red when the train goes through. And that one goes to red. It changes this one to amber. And then the other upper quadrant goes to green. So you can get the idea of the sequence of the 3 different signals. I think that's pretty well it.
Okay, John, we're
Perfect.
we're finished with that.
Great, John. I'll start out a couple of quick questions that I have out of that.
Yep.
Is I think you've touched on this slightly, but I'll ask it and I'll join in with the next one. Is how big's the layout again, and roughly what the time frame that you've been working on it so far has been?
This one's been about 3 years ago. I started this one, and it's a single garage basically. It's 3.1 meters by 6 meters, which is about 10 feet by 20, I think, in American terms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a bit tight.
Yeah, I can imagine. The only other question I do have after watching that video is the operation of your semaphores. What's the mechanism for the movement that you use?
Well, it's got a servo on it, a mini servo on it, and that's driven by the Tam Valley octopus.
Okay.
The upper quadrant's driven by there's a 3-position board they sell, Tam Valley, which will do 2 3-position signals. That fires the upper quadrant, and it's got 2 DCC addresses. It's also got a push button on it. You can control it by push button.
Okay. Now, if we jump back over into the chat, Mark's asking, who did the 30 class Locksound sound programming for you?
That particular one was a download of a German 78 class from the ESU archive. I actually have a custom. I had a custom one done, but I've had a couple of problems with the decoders because of my ineptitude. I blew one up. I blew one up, and then I haven't been able to. But a guy called Linton Towel did a custom sound pack for it, which is pretty good. But that one's actually a 78 class, German 78 class.
Okay, no problems. Now, the only other thing I can think of is moving forward. What's next for you and the layout? What's your next project and the layout, and where do you see it going?
At the moment, I'm reasonably happy with the track work for now, but it's a lot of work just fixing up little bits of track work so that you don't get derailments. Working on carriages and bogies and things like that, again, to minimise derailments, because that's always a problem for me. And putting in more scenery, really. It's scenery between the stations, backdrops, and Newcastle is a big job. And basically get it ready for be able to have, people to come around and use it without the trains derailing and stopping.
It always makes it more enjoyable. If you had to pick out one part of the hobby, and I'm going to say, I think you enjoy the electrical side of things and trying to work out systems. What part of the hobby do you thoroughly enjoy?
Well, I'm an electronics technician by trade, so that probably has a bias. That's a long time ago, mind you, and I've had to learn it all again. But I think I like operations. I like being able to actually have a train run and look like the real thing. So it ends up becoming a combination of everything in the end, because I was scared of scenery for a long time. I looked at the layout and I looked at it and I thought, God, I'm never going to be able to do this. And then one day I got out there with a bit of foam and some plaster and some paint and stuff. And the next thing you know, what do you call it, electrostatic grass thing and a whole pile of paints and things. The next thing you know, I had something I thought actually didn't look too bad. So I guess I get the kick I get is of things starting to look more like the real thing and adding the detail in that makes it look realistic. Yeah, that's what I really get a buzz out of.
Perfect. Well, that's pretty much all the questions that are out of the feed. What I think we'll do is, if you're okay with this, we'll end it here. And like Gordy said in the feed, everyone out there on Facebook, is we will be finishing this stream and we'll reload a new one out onto the page just so everyone can share it and catch in with it. So I think if you're ready, Martin, we can roll out of that. And thanks again, John, for the clinic.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. It's been great. hope that some people got some benefit out of it.